Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Jess Apple is a writer, editor, and passionate metabolic health advocate. As a founder of the Metabolic Revolution, alongside former podcast guest Steve Fields, hosted on episode 710 of Boundless Body Radio, Jess is dedicated to ensuring that people have access to accurate information about human metabolism and its profound impact on physical and mental health, with the mission of spreading awareness about the powerful healing that metabolic therapies can provide. For 12 years, Jess served as the editor of ASweetLife, a nonprofit low-carbohydrate diabetes magazine. Jess's work has been widely recognized and featured in publications such as the New York Times and the Financial Times. Through her writing and advocacy, she hopes to inspire medical professionals and policymakers to learn about the metabolic origins of chronic diseases. The Metabolic Revolution, a nonpartisan organization, demands a shift in nutrition and healthcare. They refuse to accept an America where 93% of adults suffer from chronic conditions and more than half have prediabetes or diabetes, and won't accept the pervasive illness and declining mental health that currently overwhelm us. Jess Apple, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
It's such an honor to host you. I left out of the introduction your brother, Sam Apple, which we both also hosted on the show to talk about his wonderful book, Ravenous, which he wrote. It was such a joy to chat with him, and that book is absolutely amazing. What a fascinating story. Your family is very prominent in the low carbohydrate space, even though you haven't exactly been, the front-facing version. I got to meet you for the first time this year in Las Vegas. And I have to say, you're not the tallest person out there. I'm not sure if you're taller than 5 feet or not, but you are an absolute giant when it comes to passion and sharing your message. I didn't talk to anybody who didn't think that your presentation at that conference wasn't among the very, very best. And there were some great presentations. Everybody loved it. You did an amazing, amazing job with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not very tall. I heard you call me 4'6" on the podcast with Steve, which I am taller than that. But yeah, definitely. I wore some heels at the Metabolic Revolution rally, so I was at least 5'2".
Like I said, it was just such a joy to meet you in person, and it's that passion that just comes out of you. Doesn't matter how tall you are, like you're just such an amazing person, and really it was a very inspiring chat that you did in Las Vegas. So you should be very proud.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. And I had never given a speech before. I went to Las Vegas. I was just really excited that Dave Feldman invited me to speak, and I applied as a speaker, and it was the first time that I heard about a conference that I actually thought, hey, that's where I belong, because it's a citizen scientist conference. And that's really what my whole metabolic health journey has been, is just been being a scientist of myself, figuring out what works for me. And so when I saw that he was offering that opportunity, I just applied. It's like, I would love to do that. And so I was thrilled that people appreciated the talk I gave. And it was really, it was a very genuine portrayal of what my life has been like dealing with metabolic disease.
Yeah. Genuine, I think, is a great word to capture the kind of essence of your talk. It was very authentic and genuine. I think you told me later that you were a little bit nervous to give that because you hadn't given many presentations, but that did not come across. It really didn't come across to myself or anybody that I chatted with. It was very natural and genuine. So really, really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So cool. So we're here today primarily to discuss an event that we just, you guys just held in Washington, D.C. Can't wait to hear about the rally. We mentioned already the episode we did with Steve Fields, where we talked about the preparation and planning for that, something that was put together, relatively quickly. I got to see a video of it. It looked amazing. So we're definitely going to talk about that. But I want to introduce you to our audience by hearing about your story. I think it's a really interesting, sometimes tragic story about how you got into metabolic health to begin with. So maybe you could share kind of your history, back to even childhood when, this was starting to affect you in very personal ways.
Yeah. So, my mother was diagnosed with MS when I was 5 years old. My brother, Sam, who you mentioned, wrote Ravenous. He was 2. And at the time, MS was described to us as, mommy's body is attacking itself, and nobody understood why. And I just grew up with this sense of, this awful thing just comes out of nowhere and destroys your life. And my mom was really, really sick. She never had a remission. She just had a not even that slow decline. Within 2 years, she had basically lost all of her autonomy over her body, all of her functions. And so it, I didn't ever know the world without this kind of sense of disease just comes out of nowhere and nobody gets it. And this sense of the body attacking itself, which even as a little kid, I thought about constantly, like, what does that mean? Why would a body attack itself? It just doesn't make sense, right? We're born to survive and to thrive. If we all attacked ourselves, then humans wouldn't exist. So so I was always thinking about illness, and I was afraid. I was an anxious person, and I wanted to be healthy. I followed dietary guidelines. I did whatever I was supposed to do to be a healthy person. Turns out, guidelines are wrong. And I got sick too. I developed autoimmune diabetes. It was originally misdiagnosed as gestational diabetes. And eventually it progressed. And in my third pregnancy, I was using insulin in my second and third pregnancies. And then in my third pregnancy, I said to an endocrinologist, I said, I want to be tested for type 1 diabetes, because I thought I had it. And one of the reasons I knew about type 1 diabetes at that point was because my husband had been diagnosed after our first son was born. So I had a new awareness of what type 1 is. And when I was diagnosed, I was told, this means you're on insulin for life. This is your disease. And at the same time I got that diagnosis, I was also aware that if I ate foods like eggs and cheese, my blood sugar didn't go up. And if I ate carbohydrates, it did go up. So I was very confused that I was being told that I need to eat food that makes my blood sugar go up, and then I need medication to bring it down. But I could just not eat the carbohydrates. Like, why wasn't that an option? And so I just started doing that. And I had no idea that I was starting a ketogenic diet. I had vaguely heard of keto as a treatment for epilepsy. And I'd read a long article about it in the New York Times, and I knew that, it was something used in health, but I didn't get that I was doing that. I wasn't like measuring my food or counting my fat grams. I was just eating protein and fat. So that's my health journey, is basically that, my mom was sick, my husband has type 1, I have diabetes, which I am now 15 years since my diagnosis, and I still don't use any medication.
Wow.
My blood sugar is normal, my A1C is normal. Maybe I could do a little better, but I don't, I feel like I'm doing good enough.
I think you're doing pretty well. That's amazing.
Thank you.
So interesting side note, and I just have to say, I can really relate to this watching my mother die of breast cancer over the course of 7.5 years of just watching her condition deteriorate, and all the treatments and the chemo and the radiation. And we switched to a low fat diet because we thought that was healthy. And I would bring her favorite treats during chemo sessions, like big Jamba juices and like the apple cider vinegar drinks from Starbucks. Like, why not just take a dumpster fire and go ahead and throw a 5-gallon, thing of gas on it? Like, terrible.
Yeah.
Looking back, we can see that 15 minutes before this conversation, I just got done training one of my female clients diagnosed with MS in her very early 30s. She found metabolic health and started doing first a low carbohydrate, then a ketogenic, then a carnivore diet. She was walking with a cane. She was on all kinds of medications. Her brain scans did not look good. Her condition was deteriorating. She walks perfectly. We lifted weights for her entire session. She takes no medication. She doesn't even have to be super strict with her diet anymore. She completely reversed it. And so I can definitely like feel that sense of like, I saw this. I wish I would have known this, back then, which
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course we didn't. But to know that those things, boy, they are reversible. You can fix a lot of those things. And the stories we hear about cancer and all of these terrible chronic conditions like MS, to be able to be in this world and see that, like, yeah, it was too late for some of our loved ones, but we can move this message forward and hopefully provide other people health. It's pretty wonderful.
It's amazing. And I'm sorry you went through that with your mom. And yeah, it's amazing that you have a client with MS who has reversed it. Dr. Terry Walls was the first person that I heard who had done that. And yeah, part of my work in the Metabolic Revolution is just to make it known that this kind of healing is possible. I fully accept that a person doesn't want to try it. That's up to the person. You want to go the traditional way, great. But for people to be scared off from trying metabolic therapies for healing, I think is just not fair. They have to be presented as legitimate treatments. And I say they're not alternative, they're essential. Like, this is essential medicine. If you are not using nutrition as, the foundation of your health treatment, then you're using pharmaceutical medicine.
Yep.
It's something else.
Yep.
So you start with nutrition. And of course, we have no idea, like, if everyone is going to get better. There's no, there's so many factors involved in health. But to say it might not work is not a good, reason to not try, I think, because also, these pharmaceutical treatments don't always work either.
That's
So
right. They have tons of side effects. It's like
yeah.
Our good mutual friend, Dr. Tro, always talks about. It's like informed consent. Doctors should at least let people know that you can start with diet. You hear this all the time in things like epilepsy. Like, you start with a medication. When that doesn't work, you get another medication. When that doesn't work, you switch again to another medication. After that, you do dual medications. And then after that, if none of those things work, then a doctor can talk about diet. And it's like, why is it in that order? That makes absolutely
Right.
no sense. It's
Right.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a last resort when they say nothing else works. And it's like, wait a minute, you didn't try the most obvious thing first, which is giving the brain the food it needs. But of course, that whole pharmaceutical model is built on treating people who are fueled by glucose. And when you're fat fueled, your body's in a very different state. So of course, they don't know, they don't understand because they've never been exposed to this in medical school. And, I hope that the metabolic revolution will be a force for changing that.
Yep.
Getting doctors to learn.
That's wonderful. I definitely think that it will. Before we get to that, I do want to ask about your transition from, just kind of common sense, eating eggs and cheese and your blood sugar doesn't rise versus eating other things your blood sugar does. How was the transition from just kind of doing that on your own informally, again, just based on common sense, to then like learning about this as an actual thing? Like, what was that process like?
I would say most of all, it was gradual. Like when I started doing all this, there wasn't a lot of information online about it, really hardly anything. And my husband and I ended up co-founding an online magazine called ASweetLife. And it was a low-carb diabetes magazine. And we started doing it basically because we were living a low-carb life without much struggle and managing diabetes really well with it. And it was kind of the opposite of everything that we were being told to do by medical experts. So the drive to start ASweetLife was really because I wanted to put information out there. Like it didn't exist. And I wanted to say, hey, like everything that you read about diabetes says that you're going to have these horrible complications and they're unavoidable and you can't stop the progression of the disease. And I was like, but if you don't eat what they tell you to eat, then you're fine. Like you don't have to have complications if your blood sugar is normal. But it's impossible to keep normal blood sugar when you're following the standard guidelines.
Yeah.
So I really just started reading it. It was very early on. There were a couple people doing carnivore at that time. Amber O'Hearn, who was in Vegas at the conference, she was around. Like there were just a couple people. There were like two diabetes advocates talking about low carb, and I at the time didn't even understand, like I said, didn't understand what keto was. Low carb to me meant like, you just have half an apple, not a whole apple. Like it was a very kind of gradual thing where I figured it out, and mostly by self-experimenting, by seeing what happened on my glucose meter after I ate different things, and learning that if I ate more carbs than I should have, that okay, I can go run up and down the stairs in my building 10 times and that's going to bring my blood sugar down. Like there was a lot of trial and error, just figuring it out. And eventually I did really just stop eating carbs. So it was over time. And it's a hard process because there was no one else doing it at the time who would say to me, oh, you're fine if you don't eat any carbs at all. So like I said in the beginning, it did turn into a ketogenic diet. And I was not, I was not a science writer when I started doing all of this, but I kind of, turned into that because I was constantly reading studies and constantly trying to understand. And one of my big questions was always like, but what do doctors understand about my body that I don't? Like what is it about the fiber that I need? Like it just didn't make sense. And it would take years before before there were enough doctors around saying, no, you really don't need any fiber, you're fine without it, that I would stop kind of stressing about it. And it would take years before I stopped worrying about LDL, because that's, everyone says, oh, your LDL goes up on keto, it's dangerous. And I'd be like, well, what's more dangerous, the LDL or the high blood sugar? Because that's the choice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the conference that we were at in Las Vegas largely centered around the question of cholesterol and lean mass hyperresponders. And you are one, is that correct? Do you fit the trifecta?
I do, though not as extreme as others. Like my husband's much more extreme. He's had I don't know, 500. Like he's had really high cholesterol.
Yeah.
Mine is usually 200 to 300, that range,
Gotcha.
total cholesterol. Yeah.
Gotcha. It's interesting, this phenotype, like as I was traveling down to the conference, for example, I stopped to grab a bite to eat and, struck up a conversation with strangers. And oftentimes if I say like I'm going to a nutrition conference or I'm going to like a ketogenic conference, I get crickets afterwards. But this one, to be able to say like, I'm going to a conference where we're exploring an idea where people are curing chronic diseases, but their cholesterol goes way, way up, like higher than you would ever imagine. And people are like, wait, what? Like, oh, that's so interesting. I had high cholesterol and I didn't think it was a problem. Why did my doctor prescribe a statin? Like it started conversations. It was really interesting.
It is. And the whole statin conversation is really interesting because even in our low carb world, there are doctors who still believe in statins. And for me, the question has always been, well, if statins lead to insulin resistance, then why are they good for your heart? Like
Great point.
It just doesn't make sense. And I've probably spoken to thousands of people with diabetes over all the years that I was writing about it. And it was very easy to see that when people would, without diabetes, even before, would get put on a statin. And then within, I don't know, 6 months or a year, they suddenly have pre-diabetes, diabetes, and then they start getting diabetes medication. And so I would wonder, is it the statin? Because the data is there. I mean, this is stuff I was reporting on in like, I don't know, 2011. Like it's not something new. So, so yeah, it's very confusing for people, and it's probably like, I don't know. I'm not a cardiologist. I'm not an expert. I don't take a statin. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting as we're relating this to people and saying, like, what would you do if you
mhm,
cured your bipolar, but now you have high cholesterol?
right.
Which one do you want to choose? I think people can relate to that idea a little bit more. And if I'm remembering your story correctly, another challenge that you had is, weren't you a vegetarian or even a vegan for a large portion of your life?
Yes, I stopped eating meat when I was 10, and because I didn't want to eat animals, I didn't want to harm animals, and I still feel that way. Um, Turning into a meat eater was extremely difficult for me. It's still difficult for me. Um, I stopped eating meat when I was 10, and when I was 11, I started getting severe migraine headaches, which plagued me for until I was pregnant. Um, you know, many, many years later, when I started really paying attention to nutrition for the first time. I still wasn't getting it right, but I was conscious that I needed to eat, that I needed to get certain nutrients in order to have a healthy baby. Um, yeah, I was very low energy. Um, and it was after my husband went on a carnivore diet and reversed all kinds of awful symptoms, that I was like, I had already done the research. Like I was, kind of rationally, I knew that meat would be good for me. And I had been especially reading a lot about dietary fat and how the brain really does need animal fat. Um, and I had suffered from anxiety pretty much my whole life. And it was just something I lived with, and I didn't stop me from functioning or doing the things I needed to do in life, but it certainly dramatically reduced my quality of life, and I suffered tremendously, pretty much all the time. And then, at the same time, like I didn't want to eat meat, and it grossed me out. And so it was just something I was grappling with, to both kind of have the knowledge that it works and to see more and more people healing on carnivore and see it right in front of my eyes with my husband. I mean, right in front of my eyes, he had so many autoimmune symptoms. I mean, he didn't have diagnosed rheumatoid arthritis, but he almost surely had it. IBS, or some kind of colitis. He almost surely had it. And we know he has type 1 diabetes. We knew he had the autoimmune tendency. So it was just really fast that these things went away. And then when I finally started eating meat, I used just beef tallow to start, because that's what I had researched, and I was like, okay, what I need is bone marrow and beef tallow. So bone marrow was too much for me, to start with. And then the tallow just looked like coconut oil, right? So I just started cooking veggies in that rather than olive oil or coconut oil. And within a few weeks, I felt a change in my brain.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty powerful. And I told Dr. Mariella Glant, who's been on your show also. She's she's a keto endocrinologist and the founder of Ona Health, which is like similar to Virta Health, which you can treat diabetes with the keto diet. So I told her, said, about a few weeks in, we were talking on the phone, and she's a good friend of mine. I said, I think this is what happy feels like. Like it was really that dramatic, the
Wow.
change of getting, and I sort of, since then, I really think of all the anxiety symptoms as the brain screaming for fat, like that anxiety is the physical manifestation of a malnourished brain. And it kind of makes sense, you know, it's like, where's the food? Where's what I need? And as soon as it got it, fine, calm down. It's not that anxiety goes away completely. It doesn't, but it just becomes something that you can say, okay, this exists, but I have my brain can deal with it. It doesn't control any part of me.
Well said. Yeah,
And
no, that was about 2 weeks into my carnivore journey that
oh
I
wow.
noticed that same thing. I didn't think I had anxiety, but when you get to the other side of like, you're just okay. Like stressful things happen around you and they just like, it's like you described and said so well, they just don't impact you as much as they used to, or you can problem
Yeah,
solve or think about solutions in such a different way. That's what surprised me. And that 2 week transition is like, that's the time you're having digestive issues. It's not the most
right.
comfortable, but like that was enough to keep me on. And that was 5.5 years ago. And it
Wow.
was interesting. A client that I was working with yesterday is kind of on this path. She's not all the way carnivore, but she's had some autoimmunity that's getting a lot better. Her body's feeling better. She's down to 2 meals a day. And she was just saying, like, I feel really good. This is amazing. Like, I'm thinking clearly. My brain fog is gone. I don't need naps. Like, all those things that we know. And I pointed out to her,
Mhm.
like, isn't it so sad that probably 99% of people that you see out there will never feel what you feel because they're not in the proper state. They're eating the wrong
Right.
foods and running the metabolism incorrectly. They'll never feel what it feels like to feel what you're describing right now. So sad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the sadness, I guess, is like for me, it manifests also as this like deep frustration, this feeling of like, it's not fair that people don't know this, that our medical system is not accepting that there are ways to heal with nutrition. Like and that's why I'm so passionate about changing the USDA's dietary guidelines, because if we don't do that, we're going to continue to feed people. I mean, the same things that these guidelines are basically, you know, our school lunches have to follow them, hospitals, the military, prisons, like everybody's under these guidelines. And so they, every 5 years, they update them. And the next update is 2025. And I really felt a strong need to oppose them. You know, I am aware that nothing I do is probably going to change them, but I don't want to let it slide without calling it out. You know, it's and Nina Teicholz has been working on this for a decade, and her work is phenomenal. You know, she wrote Big Fat Surprise. She founded the Nutrition Coalition, and she has presented all of the facts and all of the science to the USDA, and they know that alternatives exist, essential alternatives, and nothing's happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is a good segue to talk about your involvement with
Mhm.
Metabolic Revolution and how that got created. I remember talking to Nina and you know her systemically trying to get these things changed. And you're right, like speaking in front of Congress and like writing and having all of us write. How many letters did we all write from her website to like demand that this be looked at and changed? And you know, it
Mhm.
goes to the committee and nothing really seems to happen. And she discovers all the conflicts of interest and everybody, you know, 95% of the panels getting paid out by food companies and all this stuff. It's so hard. So we also have the opportunity to affect things from the ground level, right? Like an individual level, you know,
Yeah.
a grassroots kind of movement. But I vaguely remember at the Vegas conference, I think you said you were going to start to get involved in something different. And then you and I have talked kind of more recently as this was kind of becoming a little bit more clear. But can you tell us how Metabolic Revolution got started and what its mission is?
Yes, it really got started. I guess the original origin of it was it started when I was volunteering for Dr. Chris Palmer a couple of years ago. A group of people, we just started reaching out to Dr. Palmer because, you know, when his book Brain Energy was coming out, there were people who were already really passionate about it and wanted to make sure that everyone knew about brain energy. And you know, brain energy says that all mental disorders share a root cause of impaired brain metabolism, which is caused by mitochondrial dysfunction. And kind of once you get that, it's like so simple. Everything suddenly makes sense. And so there, and I was at that point also, like I had been working in diabetes for so long, and I had such frustration, probably how Nina feels about the dietary guidelines now. It's like, how many times can I say if you have diabetes, you should eat a low carb diet? Like I just couldn't take it anymore. So my other passion was mental health, and I had also experienced such profound improvements in my mental health by changing my diet. So we were meeting weekly with this brain energy team trying to get something going, a grassroots movement. And for many reasons, it just wasn't taking off. And then eventually I actually started talking to someone named Matthew Henry, who is a cancer survivor. And I met him on a brain energy volunteer call. He was sitting at his desk and he had a framed picture of mitochondria, which he held up. And I was like, oh, he gets it.
These are people.
Um, and so when I was dreaming up my protest in Washington, D.C., I remembered that he lived around there somewhere. So I reached out to him and we started talking, and he was really the force that made this rally that we had happen, because he actually worked really hard to get the permit. It was not nearly as simple as I thought it would be, and he had to go to the permit office a number of times. It wasn't like I imagined, like, sure, fill out the form, you get a permit, you take a sign, you go to Washington, D.C. Like, I was very naive, and I probably, had I realized how difficult it was going to be to have the rally, I may not have wanted to do it. I was very naive.
Yeah.
I didn't imagine how expensive it would be, how complicated it would be, that I would need to hire security, like all those things. I was in way over my head, but fortunately I had the most fantastic group of volunteers. People just stepped up and they worked so hard. The weeks before the rally, it was unbelievable how much work people did. We had a volunteer coordinator named Jackie Hostfeld, and she just, anything I needed, she was doing it. She was organizing people to do a million different tasks, and so it all just happened. Like we came together, and Julie King, who has the website One of 1 Billion, she lost her son last year to schizoaffective disorder and the failures of conventional treatments, and she was just by my side and through this whole thing. She is a firm believer in metabolic psychiatry, and she wants to make it known. So she helped an unbelievable amount, and now she's on the board of Metabolic Revolution, which is a nonprofit now. It's official. And so yeah, it came to be basically because I just started talking to people, and people who heard about it just jumped in and wanted to help. And as it stands now, I think there's like 200, close to 250 people, or maybe more by now, who want to volunteer. Um, so it's a lot. And I think it will, like, basically every day more people are saying I want to volunteer. So I think the movement's going to grow. I I do need the help, because I don't want things to stall because I'm not ready for them. And it's a lot. It's a lot to be ready for.
If you could choose volunteers from any different, group of people, would you choose any group of people higher than a group of people who are all ketogenic and are happy and have tons of energy and just want to like
It's
give of their
true.
time? Like, there's no other group that I would want any help from besides a whole bunch of people that
Right,
are
right,
ketogenic.
right. I mean, we're all high on ketones. Like, this is everyone's, and people, like, when you feel this good, you just want to share it with other people. And of course, it's super annoying to most people. So it's also really fun to just hang out with people who do the same thing you do. And nobody cares if you're the person who doesn't eat after sunset. I put my blue light blocking glasses on, and you can just do your thing, and you're not offending anyone.
Yeah,
Which,
I love that.
yeah, it's fun. I feel really lucky that I got to meet these people and work with them. Um, everyone was genuinely warm and energetic and fun, and there was not like a single episode of anyone getting annoyed or frustrated or quitting. Nothing. We
Yep.
we just worked together.
Yep.
And it was beautiful too to see how people who don't have much in common in other ways could just come together like this and start doing what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Like it's urgent and we all feel the urgency.
It's amazing. It reminds me of like meeting you for the first time. Like we didn't have much of a history or anything, and we meet each other, and it's like instantly, oh, we're best friends. Like
Best friends,
you have
yeah.
all these people who are you're just best friends instantly with them, and you hear their stories, and they're so excited and lit up, like you said. Like I think of Brett Smith, who was at the rally, and he
Oh
found this
yeah.
stuff a few years ago, and he's so on fire about this stuff. He just wants to do anything he possibly can to share it. And if you
Yeah.
get a group of people like that across the board, it's incredible.
It's incredible. It absolutely was. And Brett is one of our wonderful volunteers. So part of the rally, we had what I called the parade of proof. So we had these really esteemed speakers and they were all amazing, but I wanted to feature real people who had used these metabolic strategies to heal themselves. And so, and of course, like I wanted a big parade. I couldn't have a whole marching band. So we got some drummers. And Brett actually led the parade, and he choked up when he came to the mic and shared his story. I told people bring a sign, bring in. People held up their signs. And his story is wonderful, and he's so dedicated to the cause. So he was a huge help in many ways, getting ready for the rally and in being the parade leader. And we were so like, I was like, okay, we got to the stage, Brett, how are we going to have this parade? Okay, you make a lap around the stage once and then go up to the mic. Again, I was really naive. I was like, let's have a parade.
There you
With
go.
no actual, yeah. All you have to do is walk behind some musicians, right? And it's a parade.
There you go.
So
Exactly. That's exactly
yeah,
right. Yeah, it wasn't a marching band, but the drummers were pretty darn close to a marching band. So you did pretty good with
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
really appreciate. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's like if we'd had more money, there would have been, trumpets and everything else. Like it was really just we did what we could manage to pull off financially and in the time. Like it was a lot to organize. We had 14 speakers, I think. So and 30 something volunteers. It was a lot going on.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And just to clarify, the umbrella nonprofit is Metabolic Revolution, and the rally was just a part of what is included in
Yes,
Metabolic Revolution.
right.
As we were talking to Steve Fields about what this might look like, we kind of talked about that, where it's like the sky's kind of the limit. Like we're going to do this rally, which you guys did in Washington D.C. that you're describing, but there's other things inside of what Metabolic Revolution can be in the future, which some of it has been imagined and some probably has not been imagined yet. Is that correct?
That is correct. And this has all happened so quickly. When I originally started doing this, I didn't want to have a nonprofit. Like I was looking for another organization to kind of be the legal entity to have the rally, because it's a huge responsibility to start an organization. I had had a nonprofit and it was exhausting, and the fundraising was exhausting. So I wasn't eager to jump back in. But then, yeah, Steve, he just came out of nowhere, like, and he saved the day. Because I did end up needing to have an organization. Like to get permits, you need an address, you need a phone number, like you you need insurance, all of these things. And Steve is a very successful attorney, and he had reached out to Nina about something, and she didn't really know him, but she had his email, and he had told her he wants to get involved. So she passed his information to me, and we connected, and he was just like, I'm coming to the rally. I bought a ticket. And I was like, I haven't bought a ticket yet. Oh my God, now I can't cancel the rally because Steve has a ticket. So, and he's turned out to be absolutely spectacular. We had, good working chemistry. We had a few calls, and he jumped in and he started helping, and he helped form the nonprofit and helped out with the legal stuff, which I didn't know much about and didn't know what to do. And he co-founded with me. We just founded this organization, and we were already planning the rally when we made the organization. So it all, just everything kind of fell into place in the most beautiful, miraculous way. We have Matthew Henry was going to the permit office, and their volunteers were, collecting all these emails for us, and contacting journalists, and there just so many people. We Yeah, it really was remarkable, everybody helping out to find places for people to stay, all of it.
Yeah, wow. You mentioned, all the work that's gone into this. The time to prepare wasn't a lot. People stepping up and doing their part. Tell us a little bit about the speakers that agreed to speak there. Like, who were they? What were some of your favorites?
Um, well, I mean, they were all amazing, to be honest. But when I originally thought of it, it was because there was a conference for integrative mental health happening in Washington, D.C., and it was also holiday weekend. So the conference ended on a Sunday, October 13th, and the next day was a holiday, and it was like, okay, let's just have a rally 2 hours after the conference. It's not going to bother the conference. The conference is over. And of course, when I did end up reaching out to the people at IMMH at the conference, they were wonderful, and they were like, "Oh, what a great idea! Fantastic!" So the speakers that I knew of who were going to be there were Chris Palmer, Georgia Ede, Matt Bernstein. They're all the metabolic psychiatrists, and I'm really passionate about metabolic psychiatry. And I had volunteered for Chris Palmer before, and I was like, he'll probably come for me, if I'm standing there by myself with a sign. He because he really wants a grassroots movement to exist, and we had tried to do that together. So then I talked to Nina Teichels about this, and she is friends with everybody in this world. She's been in it for such a long time, and so she reached out to people who definitely probably wouldn't have answered my emails asking. And so when Robert Lustig agreed to do it, I was like, whoa, he was going to be at that conference too. It's like, now we have, an international celebrity doctor who's coming to this rally. And it just suddenly became a really big deal. And so he was there, and we kind of, Mariella is my friend, and she was coming, and she came with one of her patients, Ajala FM, who may have been the speaker that really blew everyone away. She was phenomenal. Her story is about basically progressive type 2 diabetes and being put on more and more medications and being told to eat the wrong things all the time. And she lives in the South Bronx. She had, like a very disadvantaged community. And her story is just heroic. And she told it about how she went from, she was foaming at the mouth because her blood sugar was so high all the time. She was on 20 medications. She had to start walking with a cane. She couldn't lose weight. And then she went into Mariella's office, and Mariella took away the medications, put her on a keto diet, and she started getting better. And there was this moment in her talk where she was very choked up a few times. And then at one point she was like, and they were wrong. I got better. And it was just so beautiful. So I think when she was speaking, just there were lots of passerbys around the rally. People just stopped to listen to her. She's also very beautiful, and she speaks really nicely. So like that was really a highlight. And I loved the metabolic psychiatry speakers. Dr. Tro was wonderful. He said metabolic health is a birthright. And, kind of our tagline is our health, our right. Like, you can't give us guidelines that are making us sick. Like no, we refuse to accept that. I can't think of any speaker that I didn't like. Mark Cucuzella was wonderful. Asim came, and he was fantastic. He's always a great speaker. So Dr. Eric Westman, and he talked about the importance of nutrition. And Nina, of course, she opened. She was our MC, and she opened with her speech talking about all the work she's done and how little change has been made, despite the fact that it is well known that the guidelines are wrong. And
Wow. Wow, it sounds amazing. I was going to ask you about passersby, if it seemed to attract people that were just kind of in the area, and I was curious to what they were thinking about that. That's cool that they were stopping. And speaking
yeah,
of Nina, like she's just one of my absolute favorite people. And I knew she was going to be there, but I didn't think she was going to be the MC. So as soon as I noticed that after, I just shot her a quick message like, "Hey Nina, how was the rally?" And she actually wrote me back. And so I'm going to say this is quoting from Nina. The rally was
okay.
totally fantastic. Wish you could have been there. The speakers are top notch. Carl Franklin, former co-producer of the Keto Dudes podcast, wrote and performed a killer song. There were drummers, the parade of patients talking about the conditions they'd healed, some with before and after posters, and a lot of great energy. I hope it's the beginning of something big, bringing together our movement and calling for real change. Our main demand was to change the dietary guidelines. I think Jess will be a great interview. Maybe at the time of interview, she'll have some videos to share with you, which you did. I was able to see some of that, but yeah, really cool praise from Nina, and that video was amazing. Just a composite of highlights from
Right.
the show, or from the rally. Excuse me. One of my favorite parts was seeing Mariella and Nina on stage dancing. Like those
Yep.
ladies can dance. That was great.
Yeah. And Georgia E too. Like we just went out and we had fun. Like we licensed music so that we could play some good music, which is why we could use the music in our video clips too. And everyone there was in such good spirits. And we were right on the grounds of the Washington Monument. So we're like looking up at the monument. It's directly across from the stage. And so it felt stunning. Like you couldn't not just be full of joy, and we were proud, like, to be fighting for a cause that's so worthy. It literally, the dietary guidelines affect everyone, and with the rise in chronic disease and no end in sight, and people getting sicker at younger ages, and sick kids, and I mean the desperation and the mental illness in children, like it's just so awful that I felt like we have to try something because nothing has worked so far. And I do believe that a grassroots movement can make a difference. I really do believe that. And I hope people will hear this and join us, because we are working very hard to come up with a plan for the most strategic way to make change, to bring about change. And there's a ton to do. actually tomorrow we're meeting as a board for our first kind of official board meeting. We formed this organization. None of us had met. We barely had time to talk to each other. And we just did it. And so we're catching up to where we got.
Yeah. That's amazing. One other speaker I want to comment on, you were on his podcast recently, Vinny Tortorich. You guys
Yes,
kind of went
Vinny.
back and forth a little bit about, like, Vinny was saying, like, oh, I've been to these conferences. I don't need to go to these anymore. They're expensive. I get what he's saying, but I disagree. And I'm glad you held the point up that, like, well, you should still go. They're still fun to go and connect with people and hear people's stories. It's really energizing. That's why I keep going. I've been to a ton of these now and I still go. And so I wish you would go to more of those, but he agreed immediately to go to this, and he spoke. What was it like to get to hear him speak? That's not something a lot of us can say.
No, he was fantastic. I mean, he's bold, and he was very honest about his own health journey, which is remarkable. And he's just very straightforward. Like, there no BS. He tells it like it is, and he's passionate. I was fortunate to talk to him after the rally for a while, and I just feel lucky to be working side by side with him. And I know he's like Nina too. You get disillusioned when you're doing the same thing over and over again and you don't see progress. And Nina told me also after the rally, like, this was the first time in a really long time that she's felt like there's new energy here. We're going to make a difference. We're going to do something. Um, so I think, like, with all of these, with this beautiful team that we've already put together, if all of these speakers stay involved and more volunteers come, I think we can keep rallying. We can go protest at medical schools and say, teach your doctors about metabolic health. We can go to the American Diabetes Association and protest, not just complaining about it in articles online, which I've done 10 million times. And now, Dr. Ken Berry started the American Diabetes Society. So there's actually an organization who can give us good advice. Like, there is progress.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. So I think I know what you're going to answer, but by whatever metric you want to use, would you call the rally a success?
Yes, absolutely. It was a success, just even if the rally itself hadn't happened. The way people came together, the beautiful energy. It was just a loving thing. Like, I said, okay, now that we have an organization, we have to stop acting like one big family. We have to actually act like a business now. It was like you said, we're like all these, happy keto people who just want to do good for the world. And so, and then the rally itself, I mean, yeah, some things messed up, like, but it didn't really matter. Like, mostly people wouldn't have noticed. And I warned everybody beforehand, like, this is not going to be perfect. I've never put on a show before. I've never made a run of show. We have a volunteer named Nicole who had lots of experience with putting on live shows. So she jumped in and she was kind of directing all of the things that were going on. We had an event planner named Jessica also, who was fantastic. Everyone was doing it not like their job, but like their passion. So it really, and we felt it. And the rally itself, I mean, soon people will see when we have a chance to put all the social media stuff together. We have really great content. We've got all of these speakers' speeches. We've got the parade of proof. We really have a movie. It was close to 2 hours, the whole event. So it's for anyone who's interested in this, it's going to be a wonderful thing to just sit down and watch.
Love that. Very much looking forward to that. Okay, so for the person who's listening, as we said, people keto, they're very fired up. They want to help people. How can the average person out there help? How can they support? How can they get this message out? In what ways can we support the metabolic revolution?
Um, of course, donations, which right now we don't have our IRS tax exempt status yet, but we have a fiscal sponsor, which is the Society for Mental Health Practitioners. And so you can make a donation to Metabolic Revolution through them. And that is like, we need money. We haven't even gotten to the fundraising aspect of all of this. All our efforts were just focused on getting enough funds to hold the rally. So yeah, right away, like one of the things that I personally hope we can do is, we talk about going to low carb conferences, but I would actually like to go to conferences like the American Diabetes Association and set up the Metabolic Revolution table right there and give out our information and talk to people. Same for the American Psychiatric Association, all of them, American Heart Association. Like if we can go to those places, we can really show people, parade of proof, like this does work. Will it work forever? I don't know. We're here and we're doing it. So please listen to us because it may help other people too.
Yeah.
And then, sign up to the Metabolic Revolution, and we are going to be sending out updates very, very soon about what our plans are. And yeah, we need help. Like if we're gonna change the world, we need a lot of people involved.
Yeah, definitely. And if you look at the world of metabolic psychology, you can see how funding can help in such a short amount of time. I mean, look at the Bazuki family, Metabolic Mind, and how quickly they've been able to get a nonprofit started, get some funding, and
Yeah.
studies are being done. Like it's very quick that they've been in this world and like getting the ball rolling. And now,
Yeah.
like they're creating something that I could not have imagined 3 years ago. That is
Right.
happening today, and it's happening. So we
Yes.
can't foresee the steps in the future and what they're going to lead to, but it requires a start. It requires all of us pitching in and doing what we can
Yeah.
and volunteering and donating and all that stuff. And you take that step and you have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. But by taking the step, you open up a new world and other things can manifest themselves. So it's really exciting
Yeah.
times for sure.
Absolutely. And yes, like small donations make a big difference. Like for the rally, for sure, we had a lot of people, making $10, $25 donations, and those things, they add up
Yep.
when enough people do it. So it is really, really important. And
Yeah.
I'm super grateful for any support that we get.
That's awesome. Well, Nina Teicholz thought that this interview was going to be great, and I have to agree with her. Hosting you on our show has been everything I'd hoped for and more. What amazing
Thank
work that
you.
you're doing. You have such an amazing story, and
Thank you.
the desire to go out and share that. And like you said, like if you had known how much work was going into this first rally, it probably would have never happened. I could totally understand that. But again, knowing that the people around you were all ketogenic and super
Right,
passionate
right.
and energetic does not surprise me in the least. But love your work. Jess, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work and the Metabolic Revolution as well?
Metabolicrevolution.org. That's the place to go right now. And on social media, on X, we're at Met Revolution. On Instagram, Metabolic Revolution Now. And I think the volunteers are setting up other social media places too, but mostly we've been on Instagram and X.
Okay, excellent.
And
We will link
metabolic.
those. Yep, we'll link those for now. And just in the future, anytime if you add any of that, we can add that to the show notes as well. But that's a
Okay.
great place to go. Your website, boy, your website looks really, really good. You did a nice job
Thank you.
designing that
Thank
from
you.
the beginning. It's really clean. It's really simple. It's really easy to find things. It was easy to learn about the rally, even though it wasn't like months and months and months of foretime to be able to let go or whatever. It was still put together really, really well and easy to find that. So I definitely recommend people go to the website. But like I said, we'll link all of
Thank
that.
you.
Jess Apple, for now, thank you again so very much for all of your
Thank
work.
you so much.
Thank you so much for your passion and your drive to be able to get this out and get this out to as many people as possible. We just really
Thank you,
appreciate you and
Casey.
appreciate you coming on our show today. It's been awesome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you
It's a
so much.
pleasure to host you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.